Golden light bled away from the Vermilion cliffs, leaving the ghost town of Silverbend in a hush of violet. Willa Dawson balanced her tripod on the weather-smoothed boards of the old livery stable and tightened the last brass screw. Out here, where dust devils danced like shy spirits between broken storefronts, she felt obligated to work gently, as though the place might crumble if she exhaled too hard. She had come west from Chicago 5 years earlier, lured by legend and light, and a longing to escape cubicle grey. Photographing Silverbend at dusk had become her ritual, long exposures that coaxed forgotten colours out of adobe and tin. The town had been abandoned since 1912, a victim of played-out silver veins and railroads that detoured elsewhere. It was now BLM land, draw for rock hounds, history buffs, and the occasional hiker chasing Instagram grit. Willa rented a tiny casita in nearby Marble Ridge and paid bills by selling limited edition prints to collectors who liked ruin chic. Folks who met her at art fairs tended to picture her evenings as daring escapades among rattlesnakes and moonshiners. In truth, Silverbend was gentler than most cities at night. Coyotes sang, but they minded their own affairs, and the clapboard church smelled faintly of creosote and sun-warmed straw. She framed the bell tower through a doorway whose door was long gone. 20-second exposure, FE11, ISO 100. Click. While the shutter stayed open, she listened. Distant wind whistling through wrought-iron stars, the creak of the stable's hoist beam, the slow metronome of her own heart. When the shutter snapped closed, she advanced to a second composition, a sagging boardwalk leading toward the assay office. 2 more exposures, then a final panoramic stitch looking west across the arroyo. Her memory card was full by the time the first stars winked on. Back at the casita, she brewed chamomile, slipped a blanket over her shoulders, and began sorting files. Nothing felt better than zooming in on a frame and finding the crisp glow of starlight lacing a glass bottle, or the way long exposures ghosted clouds into silk. Tonight, however, something else emerged. In the panoramic shot between the shell of the apothecary and the leaning telegraph pole, a human figure stood, perfectly sharp despite the 20-second exposure. That alone was strange. Anyone moving in or out of her frame should have blurred. Stranger still, the figure seemed dressed for a modern backpacking trip. Ripstop nylon parka, carbon fiber trekking pole, hydration hose slung over one shoulder. Willa leaned closer, pulse tapping her throat. She knew no one had been there. Tourists rarely risked rattlesnakes after dark, and she kept a hawk's eye on sightlines while the shutter was open. She magnified until pixels looked like confetti. The hiker's headlamp was off, but an ambient glow painted enough detail to see his expression, bewildered, as though he'd walked into the wrong century. By habit, she flipped back to earlier night's shoots. In a frame from last week she hadn't edited yet, the assay office doorway held another crisp silhouette. A woman in a retro Victorian walking skirt, but she clutched a shiny stainless steel water bottle like any REI customer. Willa felt her skin prickle. Chills were for Chicago winters, not the Arizona desert, yet they ran gooseflesh up her arms. Morning brought sun and skeptical reason. She printed the 2 odd frames on glossy test paper, stuffed them into a tote, and drove into Marble Ridge for breakfast at the Frittata Flat Cafe, where feather duster ceiling fans made the air smell like cinnamon and sage. Behind the counter, owner and town matriarch Birdie Kemp poured coffee with the solemnity of a judge. Birdie had been a journalist in Flagstaff before retiring to run this place, and she set great store by evidence. Willa slid the prints across the counter. I didn't add these in Photoshop. Birdie studied them, eyebrows doing calisthenics. That's Buddy Quinn. The hiker? Yep, Buddy and his girlfriend Maddie went missing 3 months ago, up by Boulder Gulch trailhead. Sheriff thinks they got lost in slot canyons after that flash flood. Willa swallowed. She remembered the search and rescue helicopters, the posters taped to gas station pumps. First responders never found so much as a shoelace. But why would Buddy appear in her photo of Silverbend, 20 miles away, dressed exactly as when he'd disappeared? Birdie tapped the Victorian-skirted silhouette. And that looks like Amelia Pritchard. Who? Local schoolteacher vanished in 1911. She took weekend rambles to paint wildflowers. Search parties blamed cougar or old mineshafts. Her story gives ghost tour guides plenty to dramatize. Willa made a circuit of her lip with her thumbnail. So I have a 1911 woman holding a 2022 water bottle and a 2023 hiker wearing a 2023 parka, both crystal clear in photographs where they should be motion blur. Birdie poured more coffee. Looks like you've caught yourself some time travelers, honey. The bell over the door jingled, admitting Deputy Rafael Rafe Sanchez, Marble Ridge's only lawman, and Willa's platonic desert crush. Rafe's uniform evoked small-town trustworthiness, pressed khaki, well-kept boots, and eyes the colour of mountain mahogany. Willa briefed him, half afraid he'd laugh. Instead, he considered the prints with the seriousness of someone evaluating tire tracks. Funny thing, he said. Last night we got a 911 from a hiker on the Sunset Creek Trail. Weak cell signal, words broke up. Dispatch caught people in wrong clothes and ghost town. Caller's phone died before GPS locked. Search teams heading out today. Willa's scalp tingled. May I join the search? Rafe hesitated. Officially, no. Unofficially, we can't stop civilians from hiking BLM land. If you do go, stick with me. She nodded, heart buoyant with a purpose equal parts detective novel and desert sunrise. They met the search group at the wooden kiosk that marked Sunset Creek trailhead, Rafe, 2 EMTs, and Steve Choi from Search and Rescue, plus Birdie, who'd packed sandwiches, just in case. The plan, sweep north toward Silverbend, grid pattern. Willa strapped on her camera. She'd replaced her usual wide-angle lens with a 50mm prime, thinking its sharpness might prove useful. The party trudged through juniper scrub, past copper-green stones and the sweet tang of creosote. Cactus wrens scolded from spiny perches. As they ascended a sandstone bench, the ghost town's rooftops peeked over a ridge like stage props awaiting actors. They arrived before noon. Sun nailed everything in place, erasing mysteries with harsh brilliance. Yet Willa felt eyes on them, as though the town itself exhaled memory. Steve Choi split off with one EMT to search dry gullies southeast. Rafe, Birdie, and Willa followed the main street. Rafe called out names, his voice echoing off tin siding. Buddy! Maddie! Dust motes jittered in the heat. Willa stopped at the assay office, the spot where Victorian Amelia had appeared. She raised her camera, dialed to 20-second exposure, placed it on the tripod, and covered the lens with her hat until the shutter engaged to avoid camera shake, a trick she'd learned from an old mentor. She didn't expect anything in noon light, but habit guided her finger. Click. Rafe joined her. Find something? Only intuition. She peered through the milky brightness between broken door frames. This place keeps secrets the way sandstone keeps petroglyphs. They continued toward the livery. Willa's shutter clicked at intervals, old hotel stairs, water tower skeleton, the church steeple. Occasionally she thought she glimpsed movement in peripheral vision, fabric swishing behind a window, a light footfall on planks. But when she turned, empty space looked back, shrugging. By mid-afternoon, the searchers regrouped at the stable, empty-handed. Steve reported fresh boot prints near a side canyon, but they vanished on slick rock. They decided to radio headquarters for a drone sweep before daylight failed. Willa, restless, reviewed images on her LCD while the others conferred. In the shot of the assay office taken under blazing sun, Amelia Pritchard stood again, bustle, sensible boots, and a modern hydration pack cinched over vintage bodice. This time she was looking straight into the camera, lips parted as if caught mid-question. Willa's breath skipped. She pivoted, certain Amelia would be present outside the lens. Only sun-bleached boards stared back. She beckoned Rafe with an urgent wave. He studied the screen, jaw clenched. She shouldn't be there. The camera sees what I can't, Willa said quietly. Maybe it's slower than our eyes, collects lingerings. Or shows us what we refuse to notice, Birdie put in, approaching. Rafe frowned at the apparition's high-tech water bladder. That pack model's from last year. What if Maddie found Amelia's pack, or Buddy? Birdie shook her head. You're tying knots in thin air, Deputy. That Victorian lady wasn't shopping REI. But the gear is real, Willa said, which means there's a tangible object somewhere. A thought clicked like a shutter. She recalled old surveyor maps showing an adit, the horizontal entry to a silver mine, behind the church. Cavers sometimes still explored it. If hikers sought shade or curiosity, they might enter. And if the adit connected to a chute beneath the assay office, that could explain the mix of eras. Artifacts washed from different times by flash floods, appearing in odd combinations. She voiced the theory. Rafe's eyes lit. Let's check it. They approached the church. Its walls leaned as if praying for structural salvation. Behind the apse, half hidden by bursage, yawned the adit mouth. Cool air sighed out, scented with mineral damp. Birdie produced her phone's flashlight. Rafe unclipped a tactical beam. Willa fetched a small LED from her camera bag. They entered single file. The tunnel ceiling was low but stable, shored by timber ribs. 20 yards in, driftwood and debris formed a berm, where stormwater had once surged. Among the tangle of branches and century-old whiskey bottles lay a bright red parka sleeve. Rafe knelt, lifting it gently. Buddies? Next to the parka, Willa spotted a tarnished, enamelled tin mug, Victorian. She ran her light farther. A glint answered. A stainless steel water bottle lay wedged between rocks. She unscrewed the cap, sniffed, faint electrolyte tang. Birdie whispered, living and dead sharing the same tide line. Beyond the debris berm, the tunnel dipped. Knee-deep silt made footing treacherous. They advanced until the ceiling widened into a chamber. On the far wall, daylight seeped through a jagged crack, a vertical shaft to the assay office above. Rafe aimed his beam upward. 20 feet overhead, a rope dangled, knotted. On the chamber floor sat a small, battery-powered camping lantern, dead now. Willa's pulse hammered. They came down here. Rafe circled. But why would Buddy reappear topside? And in your photo hours after we found his coat down here? Willa's mind pivoted to shutter times, exposure blur, how a stationary object appears sharp. What if the camera doesn't see when people are, but where their stories intersect? Moments overlapping like multiple exposures. Victorian Amelia lost in 1911, modern hikers lost in 2023, both swallowed by this mine. My long exposures stretched time enough to capture intersections. Birdie rubbed goose-pimpled arms. Darlin', that's either poetic or terrifying. A moan drifted from the tunnel beyond, soft but human. Rafe swung his flashlight. Its cone found a figure slumped against rock. Buddy Quinn, gaunt, eyes squinting. He croaked, "Maddie needs help." EMTs rushed in soon after Rafe's radio call. Maddie lay further along, ankle broken but spirits intact. She and Buddy had sought shade, climbed down a knotted rope they assumed miners had left. A minor collapse sealed off their exit. They survived on ration packs and condensation. Their phones died. Buddy had climbed the rope at night trying to find signal through the crack. Seeing stars and deserted street, he must have wandered briefly into Willa's frame without realizing. "But the Victorian woman?" Rafe asked while the EMTs splinted Maddie's leg. Maddie blinked. "I thought I imagined her. When Buddy was gone, I glimpsed a lady in an old-fashioned dress down here. She shared her canteen, then just vanished. I assumed delirium." Willa touched the tarnished tin mug in her pocket. Not delirium, a remnant. Authorities installed barriers to keep future adventurers out. Within days, the story spread. Missing hikers found thanks to keen photography. Reporters came. Willa declined interviews, citing professional focus. She printed the 2 spectral frames and donated them to Marble Ridge's museum with an accompanying note, evidence of crossing paths. One evening a week later, she and Rafe sat on the casita porch, sharing prickly pear lemonade. The desert glowed copper, cicadas tuning up. Rafe toyed with one of Willa's lens caps. "So Amelia Pritchard. Still missing," Willa sighed. "My photos caught her, but we never found remains. Maybe the mine took her farther than it did Buddy, into passageways collapsed since." She hesitated. "I'm going to keep shooting. Maybe she'll appear again, tell me what she needs." Rafe nodded. "I'll keep the permit paperwork handy." They laughed, gentle as light under a mesquite canopy. Cozy, but with edges, the way desert sunsets bleed into night without apology. Autumn brought cooler nights and an unexpected parcel, a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with watercolor wildflowers, addressed to Willa from the National Park Service archives. A ranger cataloguing artifacts in old probate boxes recognized Amelia Pritchard's name from news clippings and forwarded the find. Willa opened the journal beneath porch lantern glow. Pressed between pages lay a sprig of scarlet globe mallow, brittle yet still vivid, and a pencil sketch, Silverbend's assay office doorway, the same angle Willa often shot. At the margin, Amelia had scrawled, "Where paths cross, stories remember." Willa felt a hush settle around her. She fetched her camera and set it on the railing pointing to the distant silhouette of Silverbend. A 30-second exposure this time. When the shutter closed, she waited for the image to render. The doorway in deepening twilight showed nothing unusual, only shadows thick as velvet. Yet she sensed Amelia approved. "What do you see?" Rafe asked, coming to stand beside her. "Possibility," she said, "and obligation." He slung an arm lightly over her shoulder. "To whom?" "To everyone who ever walked here, past, present, maybe future. The lens is a bridge. Someone's got to keep it steady." Rafe smiled, desert dusk reflecting in his eyes. "Then we'll make sure you've always got a tripod and company." The stars bloomed overhead, silent witnesses. In the hush, Willa imagined shutter clicks circling back through decades, each capture a note in a chord only ghosts could hear. Far out on the abandoned street, wind stirred, lifting dust in small spirals, perhaps just weather, perhaps footsteps retreating into stories yet undeveloped. Either way, Willa was ready, lens polished, heart open, to frame whatever crossed the threshold between light and time.